you've invited me to kind of help keep things rolling at the Theology Conference. So I've been working on some of my MC patter. And I don't know if you want me to try some of it out on you right now.
Oh yeah,
or
go ahead.
Yeah,
let's hear it. Let's hear
Okay.
it.
Well, welcome to the EFCA Theology Podcast. I am not your host. I am your guest. But your host is the one man whose first name is 50% G and whose heart is 100% theology. That's right. It's Greg Strand right here on the mic, ready to lead this conversation. Greg,
my.
Take it away.
Oh my. Hey, I can't wait. I can't wait.
I got more where that came from.
I'm sure. Well, welcome to our EFCA Theology Podcast. Today we are going to talk about theological anthropology. The question, Psalm 8, verse 4, what is man that you are mindful of him? And it's a pertinent question that we have today, or Calvin's, without knowledge of God, there is no knowledge of self. Well, I'm excited today to have Joey Woestman with me. Joey, why don't you just take a few moments to introduce yourself? You serve as a pastor in a free church, but just introduce yourself, please.
Sure. My name's Joey. I serve at Faith Church in Indianapolis, right up here on the north side of Indy. And my wife, my daughter, and I, we've been here almost 15 years and just enjoying serving here and raising our family and chasing our dog around the neighborhood, all of the above.
That's wonderful. And I know that you've attended several theology conferences as well. And I know planning to attend the upcoming one also.
Yeah.
As we think about theological anthropology, I often reflect, Joey, on a comment I read a year and a half ago, Daniel Strange. And he was asked the question, what is the pressing issue of the day, 3 to 5 years? And he pondered and he said, and he did it through millennium. So he said, first millennium, the major issue was Christology. And you think about that, you think about the councils, you think about et cetera. Okay, that made sense. And then he thought the second millennium, probably the doctrine of soteriology. Yeah, you think of the Reformation and justification by faith, right? That made sense. And then he said, I think thus far, though we're just at that point 23, 25 years in now to the third millennium, he said, I think it's theological anthropology. And I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. And, for a variety of reasons, that's why we will be discussing this at our upcoming theology conference. It is our topic. It is our theme. Let's begin this way, Joey. What is anthropology, and why is it important to add the adjective and not leave it just as an adjective, but it has more substance than maybe just an adjective word. But the anthropology and then theological anthropology.
Yeah, we should almost hyphenate it, right? So
yes.
They can't be separated.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, anthropology, of course, is just the study of answering that question, like what is a human being? What are human beings? What does it mean to be human? What is a human being's unique nature and end and purpose and all of that? But of course, if it's theological anthropology, then we're trying to answer those questions in light of Revelation, in light of what God has told us about what human beings are, what our purpose and end is in this world. Yeah. So we're looking for some external authority that informs us, that has revealed who we are and what our purpose is, et cetera. I like the notion of theological theology. That is, theological theology is grounded in God. It's a study of God and everything in relation to God. And I like that definition or understanding because God is the center. He's the ground. And everything about everything else is considered in light of relation to him. Now, it's sort of the flip side, the other side of the coin of a doxological theology or a doxological anthropology of who are we in relation to worship and rightly ordered love for God.
Absolutely. In fact, that's we'll get into that probably in a few minutes. But why I think it's worthwhile for us to discuss this issue of why is the topic of theological anthropology important for the local church? You know, Joey, you serve as a pastor of a local church, been in that role for many years. But why is this topic important for the local church?
Yeah. Well, I think most of the questions or tensions that pastors feel right now, or are trying to minister to with people, are questions that, even if we wouldn't immediately intuit this, they're questions that are underneath the heading of theological anthropology. You read the newspaper, right? You read tons about our current mental health crisis in the United States, mental health or anxiety issues, or so those issues. Plus, you could think of issues. AI is coming up, and what does it mean for humans to be replaced?
Excuse me, not just coming up.
Yeah, it's
here.
It's here. Yeah, ChatGPT just interrupted to tell me I'm here. Right? Yeah. These are questions, tensions right now that we're dealing with that all really come down to and have to do with, well, what is a human being?
Yeah.
And without a solid answer to what is a human being, we don't know what you can and can't do with or to human beings.
Yeah.
You know, I'm reminded, philosopher, not a follower of Jesus as far as I know, Matthew Crawford, you might have heard of him or some of his work, and he's written a book called The World Beyond Your Head, on being an individual in an age of distraction. And I'm paraphrasing, but in there he talks about how we are so distracted as individuals and as a society right now because we don't know what to pay attention to. And he says we don't know what to pay attention to because we don't know what brings value to being a human being. We don't know what brings value to being a human being because we don't know what a human being is.
Yeah.
So even as a secular philosopher, he's saying, look, the problem is not, the phone in my pocket. The problem is I don't know what a human being is, so I don't know what I should be doing with my time. And that's, I think, at the core of a lot of the questions that pastors, or a lot of the tensions that pastors have to wrestle with their congregations right now. You know, it's one thing to stand up as a pastor and preach and look out at a congregation and think like, I know who these people are. But it's possible to know who these people are without knowing what they are.
Right.
Or what I am as a human being made in the image of God.
Yeah. I appreciate, thank you for that, Joey. Very helpful. I appreciate the fact, you know, it's been said, in fact, it was an article last year written, and the comment made was, if you were to ask 10 systematic theologians what the pressing issue of the day is, they would say theological anthropology. And in light of what you said, I think if we were to ask 10 Free Church pastors that question, I don't know that they would necessarily pinpoint theological anthropology, but I can guarantee you, just as you noted, they would address some aspect that is underneath the larger umbrella of theological anthropology. All of those things that you listed, Joey.
I think absolutely. I mean, I think this last Sunday, a physician in our congregation was talking to me about the loneliness epidemic. Why are human beings so lonely right now? And I think part of it is we don't recognize that human beings are social animals, right? As that Alistair McIntyre would say, social animals. And therefore we have structured our societies, our interactions in ways that are profoundly anti-human, anti to what a human being actually is in the image of God. And that is it looks like a society problem or a structure problem or a scheduling problem, but it's really a problem of theological anthropology. I don't know what a human being is, so I don't know how to order my days and my interactions and even my societies and my buildings and the things that make up this world. Yeah, that's very true. Let's use that, Joey, as maybe a transition or a segue into, we talk about the broader and then maybe the more specific, even this individual who came up and talked to you this last Sunday. Why do you think this is specifically important for the church? Why is this important for you to be discussing as elders and leaders of the church to safeguard doctrine and practice? And so that's one aspect of it. And then what are some of the implications, Joey, of generationally? Are there other aspects to theological anthropology? I mean, the truth impacts us all, but does it impact
as an under shepherd, do you think generationally about how we instruct and equip and address and et cetera, the theological anthropology to the various groups you think about those with faces in the church where you serve? So first of all, some of the specifics, and then maybe think about so how do we catechize or instruct 10-year-old and junior high and senior high and et cetera? Talk to us about that a bit.
Yeah. Well, I think it's uniquely important for the church. Obviously, it's important for us because we are the holders of Scripture and the scriptural witness to what human beings are, made in the image of God. And so if we lose sight as the church and as individual churches to what are these people that we are leading and following, coming to and following Jesus, then well, who else is going to hold on to it?
Yeah.
Right. Where else is it going to exist?
Yeah. Exactly. If they're not hearing it from us, where will they hear it? They won't.
You're not going to hear it. So it's the responsibility of the ones to whom the faith once for all delivered to the saints has been delivered to.
Amen.
The
other thing I was going to add is it's not just if they're not hearing it from the church, right? It's not just that they're not going to hear it, but they're going to hear something contrary. It's not that they're not being catechized, friend.
Right.
They
Absolutely.
are, but it's not to God's revelation. We cannot assume that.
Well, because we can't exist without an assumption of what human beings are.
Yeah.
Even if that assumption is intuited and is non-expressed, we're still living by some sort of assumption. It even shows up in some of our language. Like I remember learning, a year or two ago, that the word manpower, you think of human resources, and the word manpower didn't exist until after we had created machines and had to figure out how to measure them. Yeah. And you came up with the phrase horsepower.
Yeah.
So, okay, this machine can produce as much power as your average horse. And then we started thinking about people in terms of their output, not as individuals, but as instruments.
Yeah.
Right. And so generationally, we have inherited assumptions about what a human being is that are profoundly anti-human or dehumanizing.
Yep.
And it shows up in our work, in our entertainment, in our pursuit of education, just in every realm of society.
It's pervasive. Yeah, it's pervasive.
It's pervasive, yeah. And so I think you're absolutely right, is we are being catechized or even past the point of catechism and into just intuited assumption.
Yeah.
And without the catechesis of the church, then the idea of what is a human being in light of God and in the light of his revelation is going to be entirely lost. Yeah. Or the words of Scripture will be reread back into or underneath our modern assumptions. And instead of talking about the dehumanizing nature of some particular kind of work or entertainment, we'll just the only ethical categories we'll have for things are words like consent or, well, as long as he agreed to it, then it's fine, and things along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, you lose a moral framework. You lose dignity. You lose so many of these different truths from the Christian faith, and so it becomes critical. That's very helpful, Joey. I'm wondering. You think of the instruction or the catechesis of the church, and all of us. I'm universalizing, but I think all of us have been influenced by social media and other things. That's the catechesis. So, what are some of the implications, both positively and negatively, of not having a grasp of theological anthropology and having a positive foundation and framework of theological anthropology? And as you respond to that, Joey, I'm also then thinking, why is it absolutely critical for the church to know some of the positives and the negatives, and why, in particular, you mentioned earlier at the front end, if we don't have a good theological anthropology, you think of the isolation, you think of the suicides, you think of the loneliness, you think of the image, and you think of so many different things that we are being instructed by the world, and the different temptations that younger people would face, and parents needing certain tools or help as they raise their kids. You're in that. You're in the thick of that, brother. And then people like me that are grandfathers, et cetera. So help us, to think about some of that, Joey, if you would.
Yeah. Wow. You don't ask easy questions, do you?
Sorry. We think about these things together, right?
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. Well, I think so. Theological anthropology, the church is holding the. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, so bear with me, and then you can redirect me back to your question. But as you were phrasing it, it struck me that theological anthropology, I think, is largely taught through. It's taught more through story than prose. It's drama more than doctrine, if I can put it that way.
Social imaginary.
It's a social
or
imaginary.
Something
it's
like
what
that.
It's the water you swim in. The counter catechesis, or the catechesis that's happening in the culture, is story based, drama based. This is the picture of what a good human being looks like, and all of the we could write it out, the assumptions that go into that, or the commitments, the faith commitments, or whatever that go into that picture. But we're talking a little bit here about catechesis. I promise I have a point. The culture is telling us stories, and the church is giving us ideas. And what I think as a church we're not doing a great job of is telling an idea in the shape inside of a story that counteracts the stories and ideas of the broader culture. Right? Like, I can say life has purpose and meaning, but man, when I read the Myth of Sisyphus, the Albert Camus book, it's like, well, that deeply, that goes so much deeper than just saying the idea. So
it resonates. As
a church, it's like, it's the story of what flourishing human life in relationship with God, made in the image of God, looks like, that I think we have to figure out how to get better at telling. Though the questions and the ideas are really critical to critiquing the story we suddenly find ourselves inside of.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever told you this story. I was sitting in a theology conference like 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember which one, but I had just gotten one of these like exercise watches that tells you if you haven't gotten enough steps within that hour, right? So at 10 minutes from the top of the hour, it buzzes and it says, hey, you need to get some more steps, right? When we were back all in the whole 10,000 steps a day craze and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
And it occurred to me, it buzzed in the middle of a lecture. And I was like, oh no, I have to get up and get my steps. Like, I don't know what to do because I'm sitting in the third row, and like, this would be really awkward if I shouldn't just get up and leave and all this stuff. And I suddenly like realized in that moment, like, this machine does not know that I'm engaging in a profoundly more human activity right now than stepping. But I had somehow adopted this idea that a certain, my body or who I am is a product of exercise, body, whatever. And like, the technology was trying to make me healthier, but not more human.
Right.
And it couldn't tell the difference between a human activity and an unhuman activity. And I had to do that for it.
Yeah.
And so these are the kinds of like just little things that impinge on our experience so often that we just don't even realize, whether it's tech or some other story or just the shape of our cities or the patterns we live in or the way we order our days, that actually push on our essential humanity and dehumanize or rehumanize us in light of who we are in Christ.
Excellent points, Joey. And I think oughts or what can be done isn't necessarily what ought to be done. In other words, just because something can be done, and I think especially in the technological realm, if we're not thinking about humanity and what it means to be a human being, it may not be. It doesn't necessarily equate to an ought. It doesn't mean that we must do that. And I think sometimes we simply, and I don't want to say that we are not thinking, but sometimes I think we unthinkingly simply go with the cultural flow, so that on those kinds of matters, a watch is dictating and controlling what I do, rather than saying, hey, wait a minute, this lecture is more important than this buzz on my watch, or whatever the case might be. And we don't step back to say, so is this a positive or a negative? Is this a good or a bad? And not necessarily bad and an evil, but not healthy. And I think sometimes, even emphasizing this topic, it's to help people to step back, so that they can then begin to think about it more in light of God's revelation.
Right.
What does this mean?
Right.
And
absolutely. And I think of, where it hits a lot of families is when they think about the education of their children. And we could ask the question, like, what is the goal of education? What is the end of an education? I remember being blown away the first time I read Peter Kreeft's one of his Socrates books, and it was I forget the title of it now, but it's the one where Socrates shows up on a modern college campus. Right? The Best Things in Life, I think, is the title. And Socrates is asking some of the students there, like, why are you getting an education? It's like, well, so that I can get a good job. It's like, well, what do you need a good job for? So I can make money. Well, what do you need money for? So I can afford to get married. And okay, why? And buy a house. Why? So I have a safe place to raise my kids. Why? Well, so that they can go get an education. Why? Well, so that they can, and it was like this whole just cyclical, like, is that really all there is? And we, I think, as Christians have largely adopted even the mindset that education is instrumental. It is designed to make me into, or our children into, productive members of a workforce, rather than seeing education as formative, as as well as I do, that the old saying, the liberal arts were the arts of becoming free as a human being. Not free to make a good living, but free to be a human with higher critical faculties and an understanding of art and science and nature and all of these things. And, so our academic arms race towards the best grades, the best schools, to get the best income in order to is not necessarily non or anti-human, but it is not a theological anthropology. It is a understanding of the human being in light of societal pressures, not in light of the what does God desire of me in my life. And the goal, I've told students in the past that, like, education turns a rock into a scalpel, and God can use a rock and he can use a scalpel. The difference is just he can use one a little more precisely than the other. And so our goal is to be used, whatever our education level, and however that helps us. And then I have parents who are like, don't tell my kids that, because then they might not want to go to college, and then they won't be successful, and then they won't make enough money, and then worry about their future. It's like, I get it. Absolutely. I have a daughter too, right? And I want her to go to a good school and be successful and have a solid, secure, financially secure future. And yet that's not the highest calling of the Christian.
It's a bit, and as you rightly pointed out, I get it, but it's a bit myopic. It's a bit nearsighted. And part of I think the nearsightedness is grounded in the very topic we're addressing, that is theological anthropology. We're created in the image of God, which means we have dignity and purpose and meaning, and we are towards an end. There is what we call a teleology. There is a purpose. It's purposeful, and within there, we're not commodities. That is to say, human beings are not, there's not this commodification, but we are in the image of God. And because of that, people have dignity and worth, and all people. And it's not something we earn. It's not something that we merit. It's something that because of who we are. And so all of these things are it's the fruit of having been grounded and rooted in theological anthropology.
Right. We have a teleology. We have a purpose, but because we're made in the image of God, we have a higher purpose that there are ethical implications if you violate them.
Yeah.
I don't know. Were you ever a big fan of Mythbusters back in the day? Remember Mythbusters?
I hesitate saying yay or nay, or what the pushback we may get, Joey.
Yeah,
so
I know, right?
Continue.
You're like, well, I can't professionally recommend Mythbusters, but no. Well, one of the hosts, a guy named Adam Savage, he wrote a book called Every Tool's a Hammer. And his basic concept was like, hey, inside of every tool exists a hammer. You can use whatever the tool is, you can use it to pound on
Here's
something.
a pen.
Right? It's a hammer. Yeah, exactly. And that is an instrumental view of tools, which is totally appropriate. Tools are literally instruments. You should be instrumental. It's about what you can use them for. And even if a hammer has a specific purpose or intended design versus a screwdriver, right? There's no moral implications to pounding in a screw with a hammer. Human beings have a purpose.
We do.
But we are not instruments, and we cannot be used or use ourselves as instruments. Yeah. And that is something we can only state as true if we have a theological anthropology, not just a anthropology.
Yeah. I like to distinguish between a theological or an anthropology from above and an anthropology from below, and the below. Is profoundly different. That would be some of the negative implications. And it's not that there aren't truths, right? Because of the image of God, all created in the image of God, it's not as if they can't speak truth. But theology from above, it's the revelation. In other words, human beings in light of God's revelation. As we look to conclude, I'm thinking of this as well, that when we think of human beings, humanity, theological anthropology, and not just God's purpose in creating, our living here, and it's towards an end, there's also, I want to talk just a moment about doxology. That is you want to talk about at the end of the day, theological anthropology is also eschatological, and that is, it's not just the end time. Yes, it is, but it's that end time, especially for Christians, that is brought into the present, so that there's a doxological aspect to theological anthropology as well. Comment on that, Joey.
Well, you're reminding me of what's the greatest good of a human being, right? What is our greatest good, or what is our ultimate end? The summum bonum, as the ancients would say, or the beatific vision, as the medievalists would say, right? If from a theological, anthropological perspective, looking at this from the perspective of Christian revelation, we're saying, well, union and communion with God is the ultimate aim and end of the human being. Yeah. It is to be in relation with God in a relationship of right worship. I mean, that's what we're made for. Yeah. That's what we're made to, and that's where we're going. Yeah. So it's the beatific vision. I just want to contemplate the image of God, or contemplate God in front of me, no longer as just an image, but as God Himself.
God, yeah, that's very good. I would like, we have our theology conference coming up. And it is on the topic of theological anthropology, as we've been discussing here. It's February 5 to 7, held at the Orchard in Arlington Heights. I encourage, if any listener has not yet registered, we encourage you to come. Please plan to attend. There's going to be a lot of this kind of conversation. Joe, I'm wondering if you'd be kind enough to close us in why would you encourage pastors? Why is it important for pastors and leaders of churches? Why would you encourage them to come and attend the theology conference on theological anthropology?
Well, yeah, and I've encouraged members of our team to come on up as well. So a couple of us pastors, a few elders are planning on being there. Okay, so speaking at it from an academic side, it's like, yeah, of course. We're in the trenches every day, like once a year, get out of the trenches and think theologically, right? Pastors, we're pragmatists at heart, almost all of us. It's like, hey, what's going to work? Like, what's going to make the most impact or be the most effective? And it's tough as a pragmatist sometimes to back up and say, just because it works, it doesn't mean it's true. And we need to have the theological reminders or the invitation to carve out space and think deeply about a narrow topic that has profound implications on how we relate to and lead and shepherd the people in our churches. So I think theological anthropology, as we said at the beginning, I think almost, we'll throw a number out there, 90% of the issues and tensions we struggle with right now are under this heading.
I agree.
And so getting some of the first things solid on what is a human being, what are we made for, and what contributes to that ultimate end of the summum bonum, the ultimate good, the beatific vision, the union and communion with God. What contributes to the union and communion with God in my life and the lives of people in my church? What are the barriers to that, right? Sin and fallenness. How do we overcome in redemption? What has Christ done? How has he shown us what true humanity really is? Like, all of these questions they're at the core of what it means to pastor people into a union and communion with God. So take the time to come think about it, and think about it with your team, because it'd be helpful to have these discussions in the car ride and the plane ride back home as well. But I'd say take the time, come think about it, and think about how what you think a human being is changes how you lead the human beings in your congregation.
That's a great word. Joey, thank you so much for joining me on the Theology Podcast today, and we are hopeful that many others will be joining us in person at February 5 to 7 at the Theology Conference. Lord bless you, brother.